Portage County Board of Supervisors meeting, recorded October 10, 2023.
5 o'clock, we'll call the Portage County Board to order. Roll call.
We have 23 supervisors present. Supervisor Pataki is remote and Supervisor Hakala is absent.
Pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Supervisor Dodge.
Heavenly Father, we stand before you this evening asking for strength and inspiration relating to our work for the people of Portage County. We ask that as we review and implement the 2024 budget, we are meeting the needs of our constituents while being aware of the final financial burden placed upon our taxpayers. As this board makes decisions relating to special projects, such as the jail courthouse and the healthcare center, I hope that the results are based on information, not emotion, and are arrived at with integrity and within the bounds of acceptable ethical speech and actions. We pray for the people of Israel and Ukraine, as well as asking for protection for our military, police, and emergency workers as unrest grows around the world. We ask that this in your name, amen.
Public notice. Members of the public who wish to address this county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time with such comments subject to reasonable control of the county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. And Maria is getting the list. And we have no one. Correspondence. We have Office of the Portage County Clerk, out of county resolutions. Next item, discussion only, discussion of the 2024 proposed Portage County budget. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jenny, can you just go through the process for all of us so we know how to, if we have a concern, make an amendment, how it goes through committee, how everything gets taken care of? Thank you.
So this evening, if you wanted something reviewed, it would be appropriate that you could make a referral back to committee to kind of review a certain item that maybe you wanted looked over or a little more special attention paid to. Nobody's ever used that as an option, but it's an option available to you. Otherwise, at your committee meetings, you can, as a committee or as individual supervisors, submit a budget amendment to be reviewed by Finance Committee. Those budget amendments are due on the 18th of October so that they can be included on the October 23rd Finance Agenda. On the October 23rd Finance Agenda, the Finance Committee will have the draft resolution that's in the budget document before them to review and forward to this committee that sets both the annual budget and the tax levy apportionment for the next year. Prior to doing that, if there are any budget amendments, they will review them. In the past, what they have done is they will evaluate them. We'll put in a fiscal note associated with the budget amendment so that everybody understands the fiscal impact. They can either approve it or recommend it. I shouldn't use the word approve. They can recommend it to this body. They can recommend not moving forward with that amendment, or they can take no action. Either way, if a budget amendment is submitted, it will come to this body as part of the packet to be included on the agenda with Finance Committee's recommendation, whether they agree with it or not, for this body. You will still need to, as a board, put that amendment on the floor the night of budget adoption. There will be a public hearing first. But once that resolution is on the floor, you can amend it from there, and those amendments will be included in the packet for you to either put on the floor or not. That's up to this body at that point, whether you want to. You can not do any of them, you can do all of them. And you also have the option of putting something on the floor that's not on that list. We've requested in the past that, we try to stay away from those just because it gives us time to do the fiscal evaluation, if it affects the levy, if it doesn't affect the levy, what that means, so that we can provide you as much information as a board. It gets sometimes, or it has been in the past, hard to keep up with the math when there's been multiple amendments in previous years. We just don't want to get anything wrong that night and have you adopt something that we need to bring you back to redo because, there was a math error or something that we missed in keeping up with all the different amendments. Does that answer your question?
That helps a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, moving on. Presentation, Nate Pearson, Tegra, Michael Piers, Clifton Larson Allen, Chris Schultz, Procurement Director, Todd Neinfeld, Finance Director, or Facilities Director, he just got a promotion.
Luck.
Marcia McDonald, Healthcare Administrator, Healthcare Center Buildings Project, and Finance Model Update. You guys made a nice long title for that one, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for putting this on the agenda. It was nice to kind of talk it through with you about the process.
Oh, wouldn't you know? A little nervous. Can't type in my password. Okay. First, I'd like to thank everyone for having the time to listen to our presentation. I'm just going to go through and introduce a few of the people. Some of them I feel that but I'm Chris Schultz, the Procurement Director. We also have Nate Pearson online from Tegra, who he's presented in front of this committee a couple different times. And then also listed as Michael Pier from CLA. And then we have Lynn and Marcia, of course, from the Healthcare Center. And then we have Todd Neuenfeld, the Facilities Director. The first part of this presentation will be focusing kind of on just the building pieces, because that leads into some of the discussions that Michael and Lynn will have in the second portion of this presentation. So I'll be presenting most of the material, but certainly Nate's online to talk about building perspectives and any building type CMAR design features or questions you might have. And then Todd can also speak to those things as me as well, but also then Todd can talk to you about the current state of the building if you have any questions. So we're certainly willing to take some questions after a portion of the presentation. So as some of you may or may not know, because there's a few new faces on the board, last May we started in on a process of designing and entering into the process of building a new healthcare center. We reached the stage of what's called the schematic design stage. That's the first stage in any process. And as we were finishing up that process, some things I think felt by the Space and Properties Committee changed in the process and changed in the financial outlook of the healthcare center and the referendum dollars. So they did pause the project. At that time, we did have a schematic design price for the building, taking into account, it's all an estimate that works down to a very narrow, finite number that you would use as part of the process and then go out and borrow that money to build. So initially when we were talking about those dollars, and I'll get that to in a later slide, but when we stopped the process 9 months ago, we had a number, which again, I'll share with you later, but then just recently, the Healthcare Center Committee asked that we get an update to that number based on the previous design we had for the building. So what some of you may see is the square footage of the building at roughly 53,000 square feet. And then the other various pieces add up to 24,380. So that's the new price of a 53,000 square foot building. And that's key later on in the presentation. Next slide, if you would. This is more than the original price that we did 9 months ago, to the tune of about $1.8 million. I'm just going to go over that slide. Shows what some of the increases in various things that go into building the building. The ones in green I call major areas to the expense of the building. Something in excess of a $400,000 line item would be the items in green. I would highlight gypsum board. I learned during this process that that's drywall. So in case anyone wants to know, that's drywall.
There should be a P in there. It's gypsum.
Oh, gypsum. Did I misspell it? Oh, well, perfect. Thanks for the clerical area. Gypsum board. All right, fair enough. And then, of course, plumbing, heating, electrical, earthwork all play a part of a major part. So, I mean, if you know anything about the inflationary pressures that we've seen, I don't think it's a surprise. Maybe some of the percentage increases would be maybe a surprise to some, but Nate, do you have anything to add so far?
Nope, doing great.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. Third slide, please. So here's kind of the meat of the numbers. As you can see, one of the master budgets is labeled 12/16/2022. That was the first time we priced this building. During that process, we did some value engineering, which was an effort to try to make sure that the amount of space we needed in the original design was something that we, was it a want, was it a must-have? So there was some time spent in the December range as we were leading up, or after the 16th, but before the project stopped, that we did some value engineering, and they were able to shave just over 3,000 square feet. I think it was around 3,200 if I'm not mistaken, and that did adjust the price down almost 1.5 million. So fast forward to when we just redid this, which was about 3 weeks ago, you can see some of the changes. Furnishings, fixtures and equipment, that's FF&E. If you think about what FF&E is, FF&E, I just want to come up with a list so everyone kind of understands what FF&E is. Blinds, phones, food service equipment, security cameras, furniture, obviously the design and purchasing of the furniture is included in that figure. But basically we carried over the adjustment from the first page, circled back in the, deducted the value engineering, and then added all the other line items to get to 27.2 versus 25.3, and that brings you to the $1.8 million of increase to the building. So we then took that number and sent it to our financial planner. Jenny, what would be the term for the company that did the estimate?
Financial advisor.
Financial advisor, and they developed a 20-year bond repayment plan, which was then used by the CLA as part of their model. How am I doing so far, Nate?
Great. I just have a comment about the price. I know you said we did this about 3 weeks ago, which is true. We have an all hands on deck with Pepper and Wold, myself, and other trade members to get to this new number. But what we did, please understand that this number is representing when we anticipate that we're going to buy the project should it move forward next year. So these are not today's dollars. They're priced in today's dollars, but they have a little inflationary factor on them for when we buy with an anticipated buy schedule of next summer.
Yes,
So,
summer into the
point.
fall.
Into the
We-
fall. Yep.
Yep. Pepper asked, when they priced it a second time, Pepper asked, like, when would you hope or expect to have a shovel in the ground? And we used just November 1st as a, you had to pick a day. So November 1st was the 2024. Go ahead.
Quick question, Chris.
Can I, or do you want to just?
Supervisor Splinter.
Yes, thank you. Before we get too deep in the woods, these estimates, 27 million and whatever, is based on how many beds we're talking about? I mean, later in the thing, it says 25 beds, but surely it's got to be built for more than 25 beds.
That's an excellent question. So thank you again. Sometimes I'm so immersed into this that I forget that of the simple intricacies. Yes, this building will be a 32 bed CNF, that's SNF for the abbreviation, skilled nursing facility, and an 8-bed CBRF to make 40 beds total. CBRF is like a one step up above assisted living, would you say? Every acronym in the world. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
So my goal was just to kind of show you what the number was previous, redo the work, and put it back into our model and tell you a little bit about what we see as far as the market goes. I would tell you, just for quick math, I think that's about 7.5% increase in the bottom line. So, any questions? Okay, so again, we're going to proceed with the next portion of this presentation. Lynn's going to come up and give you some background as far as how the model was created and some of the things that they used to dive into that, and then Michael will follow with his presentation. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Do you know what percentage they used for increase figuring a year from now? Did you?
Yeah.
Between now and then, did they use that 7%?
I
We do.
would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate. I'm going to try to answer this question, and Nate can chime in a little bit. But that's literally the person going out and kind of asking the builders, "What will you charge for this service November 1st of 2024?" And then those numbers. So, again, if you look at my sheet too, everything was repriced, so there isn't a set fee. Gypsum board that I misspelled went up, I think, 10%, but electrical might have gone up 27%. So there is no stock percent.
Excuse me.
Go
So
ahead.
in essence, contractors were estimating what they felt, maybe their increases as well.
I would say that's a fair assessment, Nate.
Correct. And then we are carrying on our side a 3% escalation factor, which we are seeing as the norm lately. So, but yes, so we've got 3% on our side, but we did ask people to price when they would buy again next summer and fall. So got a little bit of cushion in there.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you.
Supervisor Gifford.
Yeah, because you're the procurement director, you're probably well aware of this term of infrastructure inflation that circulating in the economic news. I did some little searching online about that, and it's just endemic through the whole economy. Everything from road building to buildings, energy, power, infrastructure, the whole works. So we should not feel like, oh, we're not being smart buyers, or, it's because we're a small community or anything. It's throughout every part of every municipality, every state. I mean, it's nationwide, yeah.
Yeah, and I always tell people, and anyone that works with me have heard this quote before, it's not 20% of one thing, it's 1% of 20 things. And so it's a little bit of gas, it's a little bit of cost of their vehicle, it's a little bit of labor, and maybe a lot of bit of labor, depending on who you ask. So but everything leads to a greater cost of everything. So maybe you're not affected by labor because that's holding steady, but you drive a lot, so you're paying more for fuel or more for your equipment or something like that. So that is I would say, an excellent statement and exactly what we're seeing in the procurement world. 21% of 20 things is driving up the price.
I get it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you again for letting us present information about the healthcare center. I wanted to provide the board with some contextual information about the financial model projections that you'll be seeing shortly. We provided CLA with the financial data based on our current operations and our future operations. The projections in the model are based on how we intend to operate the skilled nursing facility and the assisted living. The occupancy percentages are based on our current census pattern and our payer source mix. Our projections are not based on optimized operations. For example, 95% occupancy in a new building would be optimal. Our projections are using 80% occupancy in the skilled nursing facility and 90% in the assisted living. These financial projections, we made many assumptions. Some of the assumptions were the occupancy percentages, the payer source mix, the payer source reimbursement amounts, the revenue and expense inflation rate, the cost of construction, the cost of capital, and staffing. Based on our assumptions, forecasting to the year 2042, the estimated deficit is $7 million. The current referendum that we had approved was $4.5 million per year for 20 years, and this would be an additional $2.5 million per year. If these assumptions hold true, in the year 2043, the facility for the new building would be paid for, but the operating deficit would still remain. Michael will be presenting the financial model projections, and then we can answer any questions.
Thank you, Lynn.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity to present the information today. I'm going to start, if we could turn to slide 3, a little bit adding on to what Lynn had briefly said. So we worked very closely with Marcia, with Lynn, the leadership team at the health center, to put together what we believe are accurate assumptions as we sit today. And what we did with that information was put it in a financial model so that we can see the long-term impacts of what we believe, not only how the organization is operating today, but what will happen in future years. As we get out further, certainly the model we're looking at is going to go out 10 years, but as we go out to that 2042, a lot of vagueness, a lot of things will change that we did not know about today, that Marcia Lynn would not know about today, just because of the cycles of the economy and so forth. So we feel confident in the information that we're presenting today based on what we know, but just know that things will change as time passes. If we can go to slide 5, please, or I'm sorry, 6, please. So what I'm going to present in a few minutes, I'm going to first present what is based on the financial outcome of the 2024 budget, and that is the occupancy of 32 beds in the skilled nursing facility. Then what I want to show is the impact of the difference between the 32 beds of what was budgeted and the current occupancy of 25. Because what we're going to see in that is that difference, although it doesn't seem like a large number to go from 32 to 25, has a very significant financial impact. And I want everyone to appreciate that impact. And then we'll layer in, so that's just what we would call the baseline. So operation of the current facility and what that looks like over the next 10 years. Then we'll come back and we're going to layer on the new building onto that. Because there's going to be two components to this. And I think, Glenn, you set this up very well. There's the cost to build the building, so the capital, the asset portion. But then there's also a cost to subsidize the operations of the health center as it's operated today. And although when we talk about a number, a potential referendum, and we have an estimated number that comes out, it's really, keep in mind, it's made up of two components. It's that capital, the cost of going out and building a new building, but it's also the funding of the operational deficit that the health center is operated under. As we go out over the 10-year period, revenue and expenses were inflating by 3%. There's a minor amount of investment income. We're using a 2% fairly low rate for that. Capital expenditures during the 10-year period of $50,000, because keep in mind, for a big portion of this building, or a good portion of this 10 years, you're looking at a brand new building. So you're going to have very minor capital needs beyond the amount that Chris talked about earlier. And then again, just keeping in mind, and Len pointed this out, that right now the tax levy that we're looking at in the budget is based on a cap of $4.5 million. And I'll talk more about that tax levy revenue source in a few minutes. So let's turn to slide 7. A few assumptions. So Lynn talked about one of the major assumptions that we had to make, and any health center would have to make in projecting revenue, is what amount of revenue or residents do we think will come from Medicare, Medicaid, will be able to pay privately, and family care revenue. So we looked at historical payment trends, and we feel like the mix that is on the screen is consistent with where the health center has been today. So about 16%, and if we look at that, it's the second from the left column of numbers, 16% coming from Medicare, 50% of residents being Medicaid, 16% of other, and 19% private pay. Again, that's a very significant assumption. The rates going up by the rates going up by 3% in 2025 and 2026. And then you can see the actual rates per day on the rightmost column of the spreadsheet. And again, those are based on historical levels that are actually being realized today.
Mr. Peer.
Yes.
What is other? You know, is that insurance or health insurance?
Excellent question. So what would generally fall in other are Medicare Advantage programs, or other types of payer sources such as long-term care insurance, or anything that doesn't fall in the person paying privately. Medicare or Medicaid falls in the other, but generally Medicare Advantage would be a big component of that.
Supervisor Moresi. Supervisor Jankowski.
You'll get it right, yeah, that's Supervisor Jakowski, thank you. Evidently Al's had a rough day.
I have.
On that same page on the bottom there, it says available units, and you have 48 there. That doesn't correlate with the 40-bed facility. What, am I missing something there?
Yeah, I apologize for that. So 48 beds is the current licensing of the building as it is today. The 32 bed SNF or skilled nursing facility and 8-bed assisted living will be if the new building is built. But as it stands today, it's 48 units in the current building. Excellent question. Okay.
So
Oh, sorry. I'll go back.
Supervisor Oki.
just one additional clarification, and it's maybe just so obvious. So on that same page, like the net.
Use your mic.
Oh, sorry. Hello. So the net rates that are listed for like Medicare 558, is that what's realized in revenue, or is that what the charge is? That, as it's put on
That's the
paper?
realized rate.
It's realized.
Yeah, so that is the realized rate based on historical information. So looking at the last year.
And so what would be like an actual cost in terms of a comparison? Do you know what I'm saying? What percentage of reimbursement do we actually realize from Medicare or Medicaid?
So do you have your cost of care? I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Right now, our average cost per day is about $610
Oh,
a day.
pretty close. Okay. Did you, $610 a day was the answer Lynn provided. I was going to say 600, but that would have been just an estimate based on, so that was pretty close.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so I'm gonna skip over this, but certainly we can come back to this, only because I know that this was, oh, I'm sorry, slide 8. I keep forgetting that I don't have control. I'm gonna skip over this, but I'm gonna come back to it if we need to. What I'd like to do is go to slide 9, which is the graphical representation of what the numbers on the previous slide represented. So again, I'm gonna go through 2 scenarios. The first scenario is based on occupancy at budget of 32 units. So that is what the health center was budgeted for this year. And you can see if the health center was to hit occupancy over the time frame from 2023 to 2032, assuming a stable tax levy, so non-resident revenues remaining stable, no increases per year, the organization, the health center, would continue to build cash. That would create a surplus over time. And you can see that is even true even in the bottom graph where operating margin continues to deplete over years. So again, not an ideal outcome, but certainly not a catastrophic outcome. If we go to slide 11, so this is the same information going to the graphs, but based on the same information, the only assumption that changes is an average occupancy of 25 versus the 32. And you can see during that same year, that same 10-year time period, that the tax levy, in order to maintain cash, would have to continue to increase over that time frame. Their revenues would continue to fall short of the increases in expenses over that time frame. So it's critically important as we look at census, although 32 to 25 does not sound like a lot, financially speaking, it makes a tremendous difference in the outcomes. And you can see in the bottom graph that by 2030, again, assuming a census of 25, that there is no operating margin you go actually to a loss per year. Again, meaning that additional tax levy or different sources beyond Medicare, Medicaid insurance would be necessary to continue to stay solvent in the health center. All right, so let's turn to the next page. So that is, again, those two pictures were baseline what the current health center would look like under two different scenarios. Now what I want to do is I want to layer in the master planning and the information that Chris has just presented. So if we turn to, you're on slide 13. So a couple of things before we get started. And I know that the information is no longer here, but if you refer back to what Chris presented earlier, total construction cost was $27,250,000 roughly. I think it was 211, but we rounded up. That number is in the bottom right-hand corner in the, it's kind of a red shaded box. So $27,250,000, that is a cost that we have used for construction cost. To that, we've added $390,000 in financing cost. That was working with the finance team of Portage County to come up with that number, as well as that Jenny provided the amortization schedule for the potential bond issue that would be associated with this project. So that was incorporated in here as well. We've, again, going through the assumptions at a fairly high level, we've assumed a starting date so that the operations would open in 2025, reducing the license by 16. So the question before, so currently the health center is licensed for 48. That would be reduced by 16 beds to get to the future occupancy of 32. To that, we would also build in the 53,000 feet of building, 8 units of what's licensed as CBRF assisted living, which stands for Community-Based Residential Facility Assisted Living. That is a slightly below a skilled nursing level of care, but many of the residents that you care for in the health center today could be cared for very well under that license type and at a much reduced cost. So that was one of the reasons that we looked at that structure in the building process. So again, 40 beds total. We did look at payer mix similar to what we did in the baseline model, not making significant changes to that, keeping the payer mix very similar to where you're at today. And then down in the lower left-hand corner, I referenced the bond issue information that the finance department of Portage County provided to us. We financed $27,735,000 over a term of 20 years using a cost of capital of 5%. Again, very subject to change when you ultimately go out for that debt, but those were the assumptions that were provided in this model. All right, so I'm gonna skip over this so we can come back to get to the graphical result again. If we do this, if you move forward with the building and the operational deficits, you can see that if you maintain a consistent tax levy with where you are today, that the organization would run out of money. The operational needs, requirements from cash from the organization, as well as the cost to build and repay the principal and interest on those bonds would not cash flow based on the current operations and the current tax levy. So in this model, in the middle graph, the turquoise graph, in 2028 to 2029 would be essentially where the organization would run out of money, where either the tax levy would need to be increased or the health center would be to a point where it would not be able to sustain itself for the long term.
Quick question.
Yep.
Supervisor Splinter.
Before we go too far, I saw the $27,635,000 to build a 40-bed facility, and 27,635,000 divided by 40 is $690,875 per bed. Is that kind of a normal? I don't know. I mean, it sounds high.
Yeah.
You know?
So generally, and I would invite Chris and Nate to weigh in on this. Generally, when we look at senior living infrastructure, we don't look and it's not priced in terms of beds, it's priced in terms of square footage. So taking that number, dividing by 53,000 to get a square foot number. But I will tell you, and then I'll let Nate answer to his ability, that it's not a normal time right now. Construction costs in every aspect of the economy are just extremely high right now. If we were standing here in 2018, I would have said for skilled nursing, probably $240 per square foot would be the norm. $240 per square foot is not going to build a skilled nursing today.
Again, just from a layman's point of view, if you look at this, you could build a 690,000, you could build a subdivision of 40 homes at $690,000 a piece, and that just seems like a lot of money for just 40 beds.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to follow as I go along here.
Nate, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
We did benchmark that this project against other projects in the region, and we also had to do the same thing where we had to add the escalation factor. A few years ago, I would have said, like 280 to 300, but all of our projects are seeing about a 50% increase over the past 5 years, which we're about $500 a square foot on this one as it currently stands. So it felt like a little normal. If we were buying, like I was talking about earlier in the conversation, we were buying now, we'd probably have about $1 million that we wouldn't carry because we were going to go to a bid scenario right now. But we felt comfortable that the pricing was benchmarking toward other similar projects.
Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you. You've mentioned multiple times the current tax levy. What are we currently subsidizing the nursing facility at per year with tax levy? What's that amount?
So in this year, it was 2.7 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn. 2.7 million, and then 400,000 in what I would term special grants. Is that correct? Because that's a total of 3.2 of subsidy.
And special grants include?
Was that ARPA money or federal grants?
Supplemental funds is what Lynn said.
And supplemental funds are, what are supplemental funds? I want to make sure I have this, all the facts.
So supplemental funds are a resource of money that we receive. It's based on the number of Medicaid days that we provide for our residents in a year's time. The state has a formula that they use. One of the things we found out just shortly after we had done our budget was normally what the supplemental funds are intended for is the state knows that there is a shortfall from the amount that we bill and the amount that they reimburse us. So they give us these supplemental funds. So now they have increased the rate of Medicaid reimbursement. So in theory, we shouldn't get supplemental funds because those rates, they have increased those rates to offset our costs. What you're seeing in the financial model for the year 2023, we had a tax levy of 2.8 million, and in 2024 we had 1.9 million, but we also had included supplemental funds So we have to, because we're not going to get the supplemental funds, that has to become tax levy.
So our current budget shows 1.9 million, the budget that's in front of the board, coming in front of the board here next month.
It shows 1.9 million, but it also shows the supplemental funds, I believe, is in there.
So we're going to need a budget adjustment before we get started. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And when we looked at, and I used the term before, non-resident sources. So when we look at either the supplemental funds or the tax levy, you know, whether it's 401.9 million to get to the number, the 3.2 million, or I'm sorry, 2.9 million, not 1.9, 2.9 million to get to 3.2, or it's all tax levy, there needs to be an external source that's not resident funded to close that gap.
Supervisor Honnold and Supervisor Laddick.
I meant to ask this earlier. What is the daily Medicaid rate?
About 330.
$330, so about half of
That's correct.
what it really actually costs to care for people.
Yep.
Okay.
And that is, it's half of what it takes to care for people, but it's also substantially higher than what it was even 3 years ago. We've gone through very significant Medicaid rate increases in the state of Wisconsin. So.
Well, how nice. Yeah, but still not enough. No. And that's the reality, isn't it? That the cost of care is very expensive. That a lot of people who probably could benefit from nursing home care end up in assisted living facilities because they're less expensive, but they don't get the medical attention there that they would get from this type of five-star nursing home. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Laddick, then Supervisor Syke.
Okay, thank you. So on your top line there, on your master planning results, where you talk about debt service coverage, and the first one at 2023 is 0.37. Doesn't that need to be 1.0, typically 1.25 to make our debt payments?
Yeah, so, and I went through this really a little bit quickly, so thank you for letting me expand that. So what we wanted to do in showing these graphs was show no change in the current tax levy. Okay. So you're absolutely correct. You need to get to a 1.0, and how you would get there is additional either tax levy or other funding sources to be able to get to a 1.0. And that's the gap that Linda was referring to before.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Syke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, being that Supervisor Honnold brought it up, going back to the...
Use your mic, please.
Sorry, I thought I was. Going back to the operating dashboard, and if we just took the $335 a day for the private pay, real quick, that math comes out to on 48 beds, if everybody was on private pay, 5.8 million. And then we heard that it actually is over $600 a day is the actual cost. So that difference would be 4.6 million for a grand total for the year of 10.4 million. So we're actually, by using these numbers that were provided, we are already down 4.6 million a year. And I just heard we get supplemental funds. So that actually brought it down by half to where we only need to budget out of the levy at 1.9 million. These numbers, when simplified like this, they don't cover the current 4.5 million that we had on referendum question last year or 2 years ago. And with the cost of everything going up, when we start using actual numbers, we're probably talking somewhere closer to 8 million a year? Is that correct? That we may have to levy for this?
7 million is the number that has been approximately that's been calculated at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Don't make me call on you. All right. Moving on.
You can go to the next slide. I think that was it. Yeah. So when we met with the healthcare committee approximately 10 days ago, a little less than 2 weeks ago, we talked about different options and the importance that the healthcare center has in the community and the ecosystem of Stevens Point. Not only does the health center rely on the other assisted living providers and skilled nursing in the area, the opposite is true, is they rely on quality care provided in Portage County Healthcare Center. The concern and what we were engaged to do was to show what is the financial outcome if you move forward with a building. And based on the assumptions and how the organization is operating the health center today, we've come up, as we've said numerous times in different ways, that there will require additional funding in order to build the building, to be able to continue to provide the care, if that is the direction that the county wishes to pursue. I think it's important to note that we're, again, as what was said in the invocation, trying to be factual, not trying to, again, say that you should select one direction or another direction, but to provide the information and allow you to make an informed decision, which is what I'm hoping that we achieved with the presentation this afternoon. So open it up to questions.
Anybody have any questions? Lynn?
I'd like to just make a clarification to Mr. Jakowski.
Please come up to the mic so the people at home can hear you too, Lynn.
I just wanted to clarify, I did pull the budget, and the budget numbers that you had approved did not include the supplemental funds. So the 1.9 million is the tax levy need for 2024.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Moresi.
I don't have any questions. I just have a couple of comments just based on our discovery while going through this process. We did have some meetings with other facilities that Executive Pavelski asked to come and just talk with us about their model and what they were doing. And they were more of assisted living facilities in our community. And what we discovered was that, kind of like Mr. Peer just said, the skilled nursing and healthcare ecosystem here in central Wisconsin relies heavily upon one another. The facilities that were brought in to talk to us about how they run their business said that they rely on us for referrals when we're referring people out of skilled nursing. And when they can't take a client because it's above their pay grade or above their skill level, they send them to Portage County to be in the skilled nursing facilities. So having that is pretty essential. We also evaluated the numbers of what can be sustained within our community in terms of skilled nursing beds. And we also found that with the beds that we currently have in private facilities, if we were to close our facility, we would not meet that demand within our community. And they reaffirmed that as well when we talked to them. If you guys are gone, we're not gonna have enough beds in our community to meet current demand. In regards to our building, our current building, we've increased our census over the past year from, you know, it was down quite a ways, down in the upper teens, and it's now consistently at about 25 beds. And what's limiting us there at the facility is the design of the facility itself and the need to have staff in certain places and certain locations at certain times. Much like what is kind of the bottleneck at our jail and law enforcement center. We have an inefficient use of space and design in both buildings. And by creating pod structure in the law enforcement center and this design that we have, we actually can use less staff and run a much tighter ship and more efficient use of staff, having a better design of the building. The same will go for the law enforcement center. So right now we're having nurses running back and forth around two opposing wings, whereas in this new design model we have a one central nurses station that can seed down both hallways and corridors, so you can share nurses when needed. There's a lot of nuance to this design and plan and to the financial model around it. It is nothing short of perfect, right? Like we know that skilled nursing in our community is not a revenue generating business. I don't think even the private sector is meeting those needs, but they have the luxury of having other modes of employment and services offered that they can supplement through other means. Getting that Medicaid reimbursement up is incredibly important. And today we all received an email from Executive Pavelski asking him what he can advocate for when he goes down to Madison next week. And I did ask him to advocate for Medicaid expansion. So our Portage County Healthcare Center can actually be financially solvent. If we can get more money from Medicaid that will actually pay a number closer to that $610 a day versus the $333 a day that they're paying right now, we're looking at a more financially sustainable business model. Currently, you know, our staff is the best around. They are the shining beacon of the state right now in terms of the services they provide. And I think if we can find a way to make this project happen creatively, we're going to see generational success in terms of the care for our residents in Portage County. So I thank you for allowing me to speak on that and just kind of give you some of the nuance behind it. If anybody ever has any questions about where we've been and where we're going, please, of course, reach out to me. And of course, our staff would know a bunch more than I. So thank you.
So I heard the word efficiency in there and the changing of the number of staff or whatever. Is that figured into the model, or is there a way to justify that or to?
So we did not build any staffing efficiencies into the model. Again, working, and I think what is extremely important in any type of projection model is to not create changes or savings that you don't expect to be realized. What I mean by that is building in staff savings. You move forward, you build the building, and then it doesn't happen because you were never going to operate it that way in the first place. So what we tried to do is spend a lot of time with Marcia, with Lynn and their team, and understand how do you intend to operate this. And we believe that this was reflective of that.
Okay, thank you.
But the point is valid that the building will be more efficient.
And my clarification was, if we have a better, more efficient design and efficient staffing structure, we actually can increase our census, which then brings in more revenue. And it gets us away from that 25 number and into that 28, 29 number, because we're never going to have 32 beds full at every time, every moment of every day. It's just not a realistic plan. So you have to account for the 80% is very safe, right? It's kind of like the jail numbers. You can't fill the jail to 200 beds because it's just not reality. You got to have that 80% kind of cushion in there in case something does happen. And hopefully it doesn't happen. I mean, we don't want to see all of our beds in any of these buildings completely filled because we're going to know we're going to have some kind of problem going on in the community. So, thank you.
Supervisor Syke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been a lot of talk about staff. So I'm going to ask this question directly to the experts. Isn't staff driven by the census?
I think it's a very pertinent question. The staffing ratio is every person has a plan of care. And when you calculate that in, it gives you an X number of hours for registered nursing supportive care. So yes, that is definitely the case.
Okay, so staffing has nothing to do with the design of the building, but the actual care that is required of the people that are there. That is where
There's a bit of a difference in that you still have to have the body in the building and paid. So if you may not need every one of those hours, finding a nurse that might go home for 2 hours of her shift, we do our best to do that, but it is not always achievable. You have to create a shift. So if someone's care needs goes down a bit, the person is still hired, we can ask them to take time away. We do our best to fluctuate with that, but there's quite a bit of margin in having someone come in to work and utilize their time. So it's a good point.
Sure.
So it's very fluid.
Yep, thank you very much. But so just to clarify, staffing is driven by census, by the
By
occupant.
resident care need.
Thank
yes.
you.
Supervisor Gifford.
Can I just add
go
one
ahead.
comment
Go ahead,
on
yes.
that question?
Absolutely.
Where I think the building design plays into that question. So if we look at the current building, and I know you're not, all wings of the current Portage County Healthcare Center are not open today, but if we look at where nurses stations are located, you're not able to see two wings down, so in essence, you have to double up on those nurses because they're not able to see two wings in the current building. We also look at things like travel distances for dietary and for other types of supportive services, housekeeping, that type of thing. So direct care is absolutely driven by census, but there are efficiencies that are driven by the design of the building as well. So the answer is a little bit of, it's both. There's both components to it.
Well, the point being is, if we were at 48 and we opened up those other wings, the fact that we went from 25 to 48 people in the beds, we would hire more staff. Right, if we could get them.
Supervisor Gifford, then Supervisor Medine.
Yes, what I would say is after listening to the whole presentation and absorbing and digesting your numbers, which I think are credible, the job of this county board is, if we decide to keep this nursing home, is to wholeheartedly present this to the general public, the citizens of the county, in a way that they don't encounter a kind of sticker shock with the $7 million number that you gave, again, which I am not going to quibble with because you did the numbers, and they look pretty credible. So I would think it's our job to present this as, as wholeheartedly as we can to save this 5-star skilled nursing facility that's a model for the whole state, right? So, and I don't know if your firm engages in helping with the public relations side of something like this, but I mean, would think any help that you could give us in terms of how to phrase the public relations of, I don't want to say marketing because that makes it sound like we're selling it, but rather, just getting it across to the citizens so that that high margin, that vote margin that approved the levy increase before will remain strong like that. So that's my remark.
Okay, we can certainly talk about that, and if you are ready to move to that step, being able to help supplement the information that is available to the public, absolutely.
Supervisor Medine, then Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
Before I get to my question, I had just a question on what does EBITDA mean?
Oh, so that the acronym commonly referred to as EBITDA. So that's earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization.
All right. I'll try to remember that. I can't write that down right now, but I will.
Okay. And we can catch up after too. I can allow you to write that down, but
Now,
yeah.
I'm trying
So really and probably less about what it stands for or what it means. So that would be the revenues above the expenses without considering depreciation. So really getting closer to a cash type of number, because depreciation is not a payment of cash. So it's really trying to understand from resident sources, what is the revenue less the expenses.
Okay, then my real question.
Okay.
I'm trying to take notes within the information that you had given us, and you have brought this prospectus out to 2032 and showed a negative operating margin of 1.8 million. And that is on, and that I think, if I want to understand that is in addition to the $4.5 million levy that we are now levying.
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
So the loss that you referenced includes $3.2 million of, I'm gonna refer to it as levy, but so it's levy and those special assessments that Lynn talked about. There are $3.2 million that are included in that, not 4.5.
So 3.2 million plus the 1.8, is that, am I still wrong?
Just 3.2. Just 3 is inclusive of everything.
I think he's asking, and then the 1.8 loss would add.
Oh, the loss. I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. Correct. To get to the.
So
yes.
start over. Well,
okay. Yeah, I was not following the 1.8. I apologize for that. So the 3.2 of tax levy, and then we're projecting that you would need another $1.8 million to fund the other operating loss, the remaining operating loss.
Thank you. I can put that in my notes in the prospectus that you have. Thank you.
Barry, do you have a question? You had your hand up before.
Yeah, I may, and maybe Supervisor Moresi can answer this if I may direct the question to you, Mr. Chair.
You'll hear it.
Supervisor Moresi spoke of talking with representatives from the private sector when it comes to the health care of our elderly or those in need. Here in the community, I'm wondering if Supervisor Moresi's committee reached out to other counties with county-owned facilities that are much newer than our facility, that are either in the process of trying to close and or market their facility to the private sector. I'm wondering if the committee had reached out to those counties and or municipalities as to why they felt that they could no longer operate their facilities when many of them are relatively new facilities.
So do we have anybody that can help to answer that question, or Mr. Moresi if you would like to, but otherwise, I don't know if Lynn or Marcia or Mr. Peer, if you had a,
I think
if you want to form
our facility does try to bring the board up to date regularly on our interaction with Leading Age. We have had specific conversations to try and talk with other counties about things they've tried and things that have worked. So a lot of it varies on their resource base around the Milwaukee County area and other of the southern portions. There's really not, it's difficult to compare because their human resource base is so different. So we have spoken with people. We continue to interact with the administrator who had closed a building to get pointers of things that we can daily do to operate. And recently also met with her. So we do try our best when we hear of a resource to gather the pros and the cons and implement where they can. We've shared with Mr. Pierre very graciously. He listens where there might have been ideas that we received if we could implement them. So many of the reasons have come from county philosophy on strict staffing levels, perhaps not having the drive for excellence that we have, and we have not been willing to sacrifice that drive for excellence. I think, hope that directs that we do maintain those links.
So Marcia, if I may?
Yes.
So what you're saying is that they're closing their facilities because they don't strive for the same health and welfare of their patients that we do?
No, not at all. They strive, everyone I hope is in business to strive for excellence. They're willing to staff at a level that we're still talking about whether there will be minimum staffings. I feel each facility should represent itself, but we have not had regulatory issues. These buildings have had numerous regulatory issues for a variety of reasons. Some of them just education, sometimes perhaps the staffing issue. So I think it would certainly be any of the facility or the trade magazines have many reviews of why facilities have closed, and often it is inability to staff appropriately or regulatory compliance due to education or, again, the supervisory model. I do not believe anyone would be in healthcare to provide poor care.
If I may just add on just a couple of perspectives. As may be known, we work also with other counties in this regard and thinking through this process. I will echo what Marcia said 100%. If you've talked to one county, you've talked to one county. Every reason why they made decisions were different. There is not one uniform decision. It is as simple as that we've talked to some counties where there is a belief that the county should not be in any healthcare aspect of healthcare. The county's duty is to provide roads, police protection, fire protection. Healthcare does not, factor into that. That is a decision of those counties. Other counties have said that we would like to remain in the senior living and the skilled nursing business, but the number, as we presented today, the number can be unsustainable for the county to do that, where they essentially come to the conclusion that this is not sustainable financially for us to endure. And I do believe that counties that want to pursue that also want to do it in a manner that promotes safety and the care that is the legacy for Portage County Healthcare Center and many other skilled nursing facilities that are county operated. So in conclusion, the reasons are just, it's very varied as far as why they choose to take that direction.
Supervisor Laddick.
Thank you. One of your first comments that you made when you started your presentation was that when we talked about CBRF, that many of our residents could be handled with CBRF, which we now have 25. We're building for 32 plus 8 CBRF. I'm kind of wondering if that ratio should be changed, where we're building more CBRF and a little less skilled nursing and adjust our staffing levels. Because to me, that is kind of an imbalance, but there's probably something I don't know. If you could explain that.
Yeah, so that's a little bit outside the scope of what we were asked to do, but I can provide a little bit of information. There comes a point where decreasing the size of the skilled nursing has diminishing financial returns, meaning that there are fixed costs that would remain and you would not reduce by reducing the number of beds, meaning the only thing that you would do is reduce revenue and the cost remain. So I'm not sure that reducing skilled nursing below 32 is probably I'm pretty confident in saying it would not improve financial results, but we did not look at a scenario where maybe you increase the number of CBRF beds, which could be something that is considered.
Okay, I understand. So the second part of my question then is, we have a license for 48, and I know there's a proposal to take 16 out of that. I kind of question that. I hate to give up anything that we have. I'm very nervous about reducing our bed license.
The comment that I would make to that, and we did talk about this, so that's you didn't ask a question, but I think the part that we talked about at the committee meeting was the environment we're in Wisconsin today is if you give up or basically close the 16 beds, you would not be able to get those back if you chose to do that. So if you do enter into this decision to go with 32 beds, I think that would be the assumption that you should make, is that if we give these up, we would not be able to get them back. There is a financial savings to that. It's $170 per bed per month in bed tax. So rough numbers, 25,000, wasn't it? I think that was about $25,000 annually.
Pretty
of that
small
16
amount.
beds.
So do we have to build the 48 to keep the bed licenses? We don't, okay.
Supervisor Moresi.
I can help clarify a little bit, Supervisor Laddick. So you did refer the bed license reduction back to committee, and we did talk about it, and we're holding off until we know what direction, what path we're going down. If we're indeed going to be building this building, then we wouldn't have need for a 48 bed. We'd only have need for 32, correct? So, and then we'd have 8 as a license, as a CBRF. So we could reduce our costs that way by getting rid of those 16 beds. The only reason why we would keep them now would be like if the healthcare center were to be sold, then that would be more valuable, right? If it was to do that. So we had discussion, Executive Pavelski asked a broker to come and talk to us at the last Portage County Healthcare Center, and he indeed said, your bet, 32 beds is worth less than 48 beds. So the committee then decided just to hold on to those for now until we have a definitive path. Once we have that path, hypothetically speaking, we fund a building. The county board funds a building, and we know that we're going to be building this building. Well, the day after that decision, we're going to sell off 16 beds, and then we'll have 32 because we have no need for that because we only have 32 beds in that facility. And then so that's kind of the gist of it.
I would hardly disagree with that because 10 years from now, we might want to put an addition on that building and we may need those beds.
Sure, and the beds right now are, they're going back into, I guess Lynn and Marcia could help, and we do have an opinion that we did ask of staff at the state level to find out how easy it would be to get that bed licensure back. But right now, anytime they go anywhere, they just kind of sit there, I don't know, on the proverbial shelf, and because nobody's begging for beds right now, right? So,
I think to hold on to them for 10 years and pay on them, and then, we'd be better off if we needed later on, if we needed them, to go get them.
we could find them and go back and get them. So like I said, the committee would like to see a definitive path, and we thank the board for helping us with that decision. If we get the definitive path that we're going to build this building, we will then sell the 16. If not, then we'll hold on to them to see what the direction is.
Supervisor.
I just want to add one thing to that, because is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but probably the path you would take, that if you choose the direction to build the new building, is you go from 48, you'd enter into a plan of construction to go to 32. The state has what's called bed banking, so you would put them on hold. So you wouldn't actually get rid of them immediately. The only time that you can do this under the state licensure is when you have a plan of construction. So you would have slightly more time to decide what to do with those 16 beds than just immediately getting rid of them. So,
Supervisor.
again, that's probably a next step. But
Supervisor Jankowski, then Supervisor Keller.
Here's another assumption. We just saw strikes on the western part of the states. They're looking for more people and higher wages. If that works its way here, the assumption you're making right now would not be sustainable if the wages went up in this area. Because if the wages go up at other places in this area, we're going to be scratching to fill our people.
We don't have unions.
That's a
We
true
don't
statement.
have unions, but there still could be a change in how people pay and increase their people at the facilities here.
Supervisor, that's just a statement.
Yeah, that's a statement, yes.
Supervisor Keller,
A quick statement and a question. Regarding Supervisor Laddick's question, if we were to increase our number of CBRF beds, we would actually be competing with a lot of private service providers in the area, so that's important to keep in mind. My question is, as you talked about the differences from county to county, those counties that have decided not to continue giving these types of services, what is the state of healthcare for those people in need in those counties?
I don't feel comfortable responding to that. I feel like that you would need to reach out to those counties to
Does
see how
Director
they
McDonald, do you have any idea?
I think it varies. We have 2 skilled facilities in our county. There are 5 in Wood County. So many counties, one closes, there are others there. So we're the only county that I know of that has, just 2 skilled facilities. Many times it's 5 or 7. I know Wapaka County until recently had at 1.6. Now they've had a couple closings.
so while I've got you up there too, the question we've talked about CBRFs. And so everybody understands the CBRFs, we have a lot of other healthcare places around Stevens Point, Plover area. Are most or the majority of those CBRFs?
The majority of them are either CBRF or RCAC. There's a minute difference. The RCACs, the residents are a bit more independent, and on any given day, there are 40 to 46 competitors in the Plover Point area. And you said that very well. One of our goals was to use that as a small 8-bed, non-competitive, but transitional idea where people weren't quite ready to just go out and have an immediate, less structured setting. So that was part of our focus on staying at 8.
And I think part of the reason of keeping it only 8 beds was the fact that we aren't as abrasive with the other competitors and stuff, and we're not taking that away from them, because otherwise, if we didn't have that component, they would go somewhere else.
It is a different service model, correct?
So where are we at here? Supervisor Dubek.
I'm not a math teacher, I'm an English teacher. So I look at this that we need $7 million a year to fund this. Is that correct? And
That's what the initial calculations are showing.
okay, so the last referendum, or where the referendum gave us $4.5 million. That's 2.5 left. How are we going to get that 2.5? What's the path that Ms. Moresi asked? Are we going to go to referendum? If so, how soon are we going to do this? Is there a plan in the works for this?
So that's the $2.5 million question, I guess. So to figure out what we're going to do, and that will be something that will come out of the healthcare, probably. Depending on what it is, it may come out of healthcare. It may also go to finance. It may go to space and property. There may be a couple places that it stops along the way, depending on what it is. So,
is there a timeline for this? Are we going to go in April for referendum? Are we going to wait? And
it would be nice to do it with this body, but because of the simple fact that every time we've got an election in April, and every time we do it, we change it around and we start all over. So, Supervisor Moresi, can you help me with a time frame or what your thoughts are?
Yes, thank you. We have initiated the process, and we've worked with Director Jossi and with Maria on getting dates and timelines, and where it will be going to each appropriate committee. Our next item here is to get the appropriate language for the referendum and the appropriate dollar amount together, so that we can submit that question to DOR for their review. Once that once that review comes back, it then will go to all the other committees for their blessing and to ours, and then eventually to this body here. That is a path. That is the referendum path. There are other ideas floating around right now that, the voters have voted on this twice and supported it. And I'm getting a lot of emails saying, hey, we're expecting Portage County to do this. Fund the building, use the referendum for operational costs, which is completely within the parameters of that $4.5 million. It's just a matter now of making sure that this body has all of the data, all of the facts in front of them so they can make an informed decision. My wish would be that you do support this effort, whichever path we go forward, whether it be funding a building or allowing the referendum to go forward so the voters can say yay or nay for the final amount of money to get us over the finish line. And I say that because, nobody could have predicted the outcome of, inflation post-COVID. Some maybe could have predicted it, or it was, well-wishing, but I think we're seeing that with this building. We're seeing that with the effects of the law enforcement center. We're all trying to go down the same pathway together, and I think this isn't a question of either or. It's more of a question of yes and how do we do it to make it successful for our residents. So I hope that you can all take a look at this with,
I've still got other people that have their
Yes,
hand,
please
have
go ahead.
questions.
Thank
So Supervisor Oki, did you have your hand up as well?
I did, and if this is known, I'm not sure, but the political platform in Wisconsin is somewhat Medicaid, anti-Medicaid. Healthcare professionals have been lobbying for increased Medicaid reimbursements for decades. And I think the reality being that, yes, if it does go forth, this would truly be a tax levy because it's unlikely that platform is really going to shift much in terms of Medicaid reimbursements just by virtue of Wisconsin having our own, so to speak, Medicaid system and choosing not to participate in the federal system. So I put that out there.
Anybody else have their hand up? Supervisor Matt Jakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've heard the $7 million number tossed around a lot, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. So when I talk to my constituents, that's $7 million. That is $7 million total. There's going to be, if that went through a referendum, there would be no other levy to that. It would be just 7 million, or are we adding the 1.9 million to that?
That's all inclusive.
That's all
That's all
inclusive.
inclusive.
Okay.
But I know we've said this multiple times. I want to reiterate that as an estimate.
I
That
understand.
number is out in 2042, which there are a lot of things that will change between now and 2042.
And we've talked about it before too, the makeup of it, there isn't a real set amount on how much is supposed to go towards the construction or how much is supposed to go towards operation. It's lumped in as one number, but, and when they did this, before when we ran the referendum for 4.5 million, I know that there was talks at the last minute because I think they were gonna ask for 4 or 4.2. And I said, oh, no, we better bump it. We better go more. And they went to 4.5.
It was 2.5, Mr. Chair.
It's still not enough.
No, it was 2.5 and they went to 4.5.
Okay, but even at the end though, there was another variation of that where we were talking about the 4, make sure we've got enough, because that was at the start of COVID, was when we were getting into this, and then things just took off. So Supervisor Keller.
Quickly, and just so I can speak in simple terms to my constituents, and so I, a right-brainer, can understand this myself. What we're talking about, $7 million, 70,000 citizens in the county, about $100 a year per person, although that's not how we're taxed, right? That's in addition to what we're paying in taxes today, right? That would be considered new money.
That gets really, that's a really a tricky question.
Thank you. That's what I would like to be able to kind of answer.
Yeah, because I believe that Trish, you're on here, but I believe that we are using the referendum money to support the healthcare center now. So that, where does that show up on the tax roll, Jen?
2 referendums.
Yeah.
Lynn, probably.
Trish, are you on here?
We covered it earlier, Mr. Chair. It's just under 2 million for this year. So to Supervisor Keller's question, it would be, if it was 2 million for the next 10 years and I went to 7, it would be 5 million new money.
Yeah, it's gonna show up. It's definitely gonna show up on your taxes, and we haven't realized the 4.5. We've only realized the 3.2, and that will be this year. We will realize the 3.2 in your tax bill, much less get to the 4.5 or to the 7. So,
and Supervisor Moresi, I would say at one. I want to say in the previous year it was 2.8, and then what they went to levy. And that was to cover some costs that we incurred from the building already, some of the design work and stuff like that. And then this year, I believe the number is 1.9, and that's of the 4.5. Do you agree with me, Supervisor? Okay.
So the other part I want to make clear is that we are limited to how much we can increase the taxes by net new construction. By having the referendum, it allows us to go above and beyond that because the citizens of the community have allowed it. So that's a mechanism that the government gave us to be able to generate more or tax more. So yes, it will show up on your tax rolls no matter what we're talking about. It's on the tax rolls now. You're seeing probably 3.2, 3.3, but you will see as it escalates, it will go up to 7. And that's one of the reasons that we were not able to continue, because the projections on this weren't able to go past year 2. And it has to go, the 4.5, we need to hit that in the 20th year. So now we're talking about the 7 million is the 7 million we would hit in the 20th year. We don't take 7 million every year. We ratchet it up as it goes along, as the need is there. The construction costs will be the same. Well, the interest rate will come down, but we'll have the same there. But it's the operating cost. As the operating cost goes up, then we continue to increase that, and that goes on your taxes.
So my question is, before we vote on this.
There is
will I
no
be
vote
able-
tonight, so.
I do want to, before we do vote, am I going to be able to tell my voters how much more it's going to cost them?
Yes. All that data will be there.
Yeah, and that's a question for Jenny, but I think it's very tricky because every year there's so many components that give us our mill rate at the end of the year that'll vary that, so. Short?
Very short. Part of our intention, much like the last committee who ran the referendum, had a small website giving all the data that they could have out there for the taxpayers, how much it's going to cost per 100,000 on your home, how much it's going to be per year. All that data will be available. I'm hoping we can have an informational type of web page on the Portage County website, but that'll definitely be available before the vote for the supervisors as well, because we want you to have that information. We want you giving relevant data to your constituents so they can advocate for or against it.
Let's maybe put that website on the signs this time.
So, Supervisor Dodge.
Supervisor Morisi just mentioned advocating. As I remember the last time we went to referendum, we were told repeatedly that you could give information to your constituents. You cannot advocate for the project. So we may want some clarification on that.
Anybody else? Supervisor Splinter.
Yeah, I was kind of involved in the last referendum when I was on the healthcare committee. And if I recall back then, gas was well under $2 a gallon, and not much of an inflation factor at all. So if we go ahead with this, I mean, we're all kind of slightly confused as a board as to what we want, but it should be very clear, and as Mr. Keller said, what it's going to cost, because everybody is dialing, you know, you've got monthly gas costs going up, you know, $150 a month. And we even throw in a wheel tax last time forever. So the public, I'm glad the public has a say in this, because it'd be a tough call. But they have the ultimate say as to whether they want to continue this healthcare center, you know, even at a loss. If that's what they want, that's what, you know, they'll pay for it. But when you get down to that referendum, we got to make it fairly clear as what it's going to cost every taxpayer. If they vote yes, okay, that's fine, I can deal with that. Or no, I've had it up to here with inflation, gas cost, the whole 9 yards, the economy, and they can make a decision that way too. So let's just keep it simple when we get to the referendum, so it's very clear, because right now it's a little bit sketchy.
So when we get to that point, we will have that. But again, these are projections, these numbers, because the one number that will change is the unknown, is the operational cost side. So Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Moresi made reference when we were talking about bed numbers to we would immediately sell those beds. Is there an economic value to those beds? I was under the impression that we just stopped paying the bed tax. Are we able to actually sell those where there's a value to those beds?
And I think someone else said it as well, that there's nobody looking for beds right now either, so.
Supervisor Moresi made mention to selling those beds right away.
In the past, that's been a practice where they were sold, and when we're scrambling for numbers, when the things were at a boom. And Lynn and Marcia, was that around 2013, 2014? We were busting at the seams. We were 80 some. 2015, yeah, we were at capacity and then some. So and since then, it has slowly come down. And that was one of my questions. And Lynn or Marcia, if you could answer this, what is the big driver, or why can we identify why the numbers, there's such a change from, if you say 2015 or 2016, when the numbers were at capacity and we were just busting at the seams and busy, and now we're 25, 20.
An excellent point. Anybody that has listened when we chatted before, there used to be two options. You were cared for at home when you went home from the hospital, or to a skilled facility. With the birth of CBRF, the onset and the building of things such as Oak Ridge, which is now Dimensions, the community senior living's plethora hit about 7 years ago, really prime time. We went from 2 little assisted livings to 40. We went to 2 major communities that have both RCAC and CBRF, as well as independent housing and memory units. So it just boomed to keep people in less structured settings. The state made a mandate. The only way you could be paid for in a nursing home is if you needed 24-hour RN coverage, and that kicked off all of the other major. So the need, and then during the pandemic, healthcare and hospice continued to grow to keep people at home because due to infection prevention, that was their choice. And so we used to have 1 hospice. We have 8 hospice contracts available.
And do you think some of the folks from the COVID too, that people now are tending to work at home, maybe are taking care of their loved ones as well?
Absolutely.
And didn't you mention one other time about the insurance companies were saying that if you didn't need 24-hour care, you were going somewhere else?
You used to almost always get your 100 days Medicare. Past 6 to 7 years, they tell you how many days, and people that even hit 20 days is rare. If you come under private insurance, they evaluate you every day, and often you're not out of that first week, and they stop your Medicare or your insurance benefits. They're really closely regulated. Under family care, You are required to find an alternate placement, but they can stop funding if the person does not need 24-hour nursing care.
And one other question too, that had come up before too, was staffing. And how are we doing for staffing? Are we, at one point, I think we were talking about trying to find an RN or you get someone, and then I think we have a new doctor as well, or?
We do have a new medical director very successfully. We've been sticking right around 25 because we are able to staff without using outside agencies. It's very hard. We've been trying to interview an RN. We finally completed the interview about a week and a half ago. The individual may or may not look at us as an opportunity. That's the first RN interview in about 3 months. So there are so many RN options that finding people that would like to work the PM or nights are difficult. So we've stayed very pure by not using outside agencies, but they're a hot commodity. The hospital is in close competition.
Supervisor Syke?
Mr. Chair, I didn't get a chance or I didn't get an answer to my question.
I'm sorry.
So the only economic value to those beds right now would be if we would sell the current facility as a 48-bed facility. Otherwise, there's no value to the beds other than the cost savings if we quit paying that bed tax or license, whatever I've heard people refer to it as both.
There's value to the company that has talked about buying it.
Correct. If we would sell the facility
They would want
as is.
more bed, they want the larger number of beds, yes, so.
That I understand, but again, my question was if we don't have the opportunity to sell the beds, as Supervisor Moresi said, we would just stop paying the license and or bed tax, however it was referred to.
And we have turned beds a couple times, I think, we've turned beds in already.
We were over 100 at one time, I remember.
So, and to get it to where its current state, we've given those beds back, and that was for the reason of cost avoidance, not having to pay that $170 a month.
But again, other than being able to sell the current facility with a larger population ceiling per se,
Yep.
There's no economic value to selling the beds. We just stop paying a bed tax and or license, correct?
Yes.
I said sold and I should have said decertify, like send them back to the state. So I thank you for the correction.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Now you're good?
I am.
Okay. Supervisor Syke, do you have your hand up? Then
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Dodge?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to make a statement. I'm extremely concerned with the direction of outsourcing. Years ago, the laundry was outsourced. A couple of years ago in front of this board, we took a vote to outsource the kitchen, and we just heard from our director that we haven't yet, but we may have to look at outsourcing care. It seems to be a trend. It's very worrisome for me. I would hate to be a county that has a healthcare facility that we are now maintaining and renting out. So it's just a statement in with the trends that we've been seeing and the statements I've heard. So thank you.
Supervisor Dodge?
I guess as we're talking here, I'm thinking the Healthcare Committee had a speaker, a broker about selling the facility. Quite frankly, I think that we ought to have that information at hand as well. I know nothing about a willing buyer, whatever. It is an option that maybe the public would want to consider when they're voting on this referendum, if it goes to referendum. So I think we need to be aware of all the options, which includes home health. I mean, I hate to say this, but when I read the obituaries, a lot of people are dying peacefully at home. And it sounds like it's the way families like it. So, you know, there are options, and I think we as decision makers should know what those are.
Anything else? It was a good discussion. I'm glad we were able to talk about this and get it out, because there is one of the things that, we've said over and over is make sure that the information is out there and everybody has it. I think it was a year ago, Executive Pavelski and I went to a breakfast or whatever, and we spoke about the nursing home, and a lot of the people there, it's like they didn't have any of the information or any of the facts, and we struggle with that all the time to make sure everybody gets the information and gets it out there. I don't know, we have media and who's covering it or how they're covering it or what they're putting out there. It's important to make sure that everybody does their due diligence and talk to people, a lot of people, to make sure that they're all aware and they have all the facts, because afterwards it's like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. So, all right. Thank you, sir. Resolutions and ordinances. Town of Stockton Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Portage County Zoning Ordinance Map Amendment. Clay Smith.
This is Resolution 159-2022-2024 submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. I do recommend a technical amendment of changing the date from October 17th, 2023 to October 10th, 2023.
So I have a motion by Supervisor Rakowski, seconded by Supervisor Barry Jakowski. On the amendment, if there's no objections, we don't need to take them up. With a unanimous vote, we can correct the amendment. It's the date change.
Don't you have the motion of the original one first in order to amend it?
I just took a motion on the original one from Supervisor Rakowski and seconded by Supervisor Barry Jakowski. So if there's no objections, I'll take a unanimous vote on the amendment.
Aye.
All those in favor with aye? Aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment carries. Back to the original resolution as amended. Is there any discussion or topics? All those in favor with aye? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, Town of Stockton Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Portage County Zoning Ordinance Map Amendment. Vogler.
This is Resolution 160-2022-2024 submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. I recommend the same technical amendment of changing the date from October 17th to October 10th.
So we'll do it again. Motion by Supervisor Barry Jakowski, seconded by Supervisor Morrow. If there's no objection on the amendment, I'll take a unanimous vote. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the original motion as amended. It's a Scrivener error, so I see Mr. Medine is looking at me. It's a Scrivener error, so technically, the only thing it changes and the formality is as long as it's unanimously voted on, I don't need a motion or a second, so. Just one more twist, I guess. So back to the original resolution as amended with the date change. Any discussion? All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Town of Grant Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
This is Resolution 161-2022.
Yeah, I can pick a target. That's okay.
2024 submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. Same technical amendment of changing from October 17th to October 10th.
Take a motion from someone. Motion by Supervisor Dubek, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Now on the amendment, if there's no objections, I'll take a unanimous vote on the amendment. All those in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the original motion. As you have a question?
I have a comment.
Supervisor Matt Jakowski.
Microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The solar thing is new to all of us here. As I read through the solar regulations, the state regulates this through the Public Service Commission, and we've been told time and time again that our local regulation doesn't pertain to that. it's the ultimate authority of the Public Service Commission. I'm going to be abstaining from this because we ran into the same issue when the state redid shoreline zoning, and we had to change it as a county. I realize Grant has their own zoning, and they do have the comp plan approved through us, but I do not know how the town of Grant can overstep the Public Service Commission, because it is written in state statute that it can't be done that way. So I'm going to abstain from this, so that's where I stand.
We don't have anybody here from planning and, oh, Kristen's here. Oh, Kristen's here. She's been waiting patiently. Well, Kristen, do you have any information on this? Because my understanding as well is that, up to the mic, please, as well as that somebody can have things that are more restrictive, but not less restrictive from the state. So.
I mean, you are right. I mean, the Public Service Commission has their own, set of regulations. From what I understand, though, is that there is, I believe, something written that also allows the towns, municipalities to have their own comprehensive plans. It's not something that is supposed to be like a strict, it's more of like a negotiating tool is what the towns are able to use it for. If the Public Service Commission wants to do their own thing, they're welcome to do that, but it still gives the towns, like Plover has recently adopted an update to their future land use map and their Chapter 8. It just gives them a little bit, I will say, a seat at the table to, make some talking points. They're not going to get everything that they want, but it's just,
It's
as
one
far
of
as I know.
And now that you mention that, I do recall that there was an adjustment for that. There was some parcels that were on Highway 54 going towards Rapids on the edge of Plover that are in the town of Plover, and that they were marked as future solar. But because of the fact that I think they had talked to the town of Plover and they had talked about their comprehensive plan, that the village of Plover went back and amended their comprehensive plan as well. And now those spots on the maps are alternatives for solar as well on in that area. So that's that there is I think one of the tools that's in the tool pouch for them to try and negotiate or try and get them to pay more attention to it is the comprehensive plan. And I know that it's been talked with the folks at the state level too, that this is something where the industry is growing faster than the regulations and the rest of the things where they need to pay attention to it. Somebody else has
Supervisor Hakala.
Supervisor Hakala, you had a comment?
Yes. So I'm the treasurer for the town of Grant, and we know it's pretty much futile to try to do this. But our thought is that the Public Service Commission will see this, and they may, we think it gives us a seat at the table. Probably not really. But as a town, we feel we have to try doing something, or else, the residents may say, well, why didn't you try doing anything? So, if nothing else, the Public Service Commission sees it. They decide everything. And I really doubt if anything's going to change, but we just feel we had to do it.
And I believe that you are correct that when they sit down and look at it, it's something that causes them to pause and have some discussion. And depending on what goes on, that's your best chance to get something altered or changed. Supervisor Splinter.
Yeah, we talked about this in planning and zoning and kind of agreed that the plan being out there at least gives the Public Service Commission places where there's no opposition to them coming in, and places where they want to protect it, and kind of a PR. It's more of a PR thing where they probably will go to the path of least resistance, and in the town of Grant can maintain areas where they really don't want it, but there's open areas where they're saying okay. So the Public Service Commission, like I said, they can do what they want, but I think they, from a public relations point of view, they probably will, at least they got a plan in front of them from the town that they can look at before they start plotting out where to put one of these solar farms. And it just goes over a lot better public relations, not to fight with the town down the line, so.
Anybody else have anything? All right, we have an amended resolution. I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Syke and Supervisor Matt Chakowski. Abstain. Motion carries. Number 8, approving and authorizing the 2024 and 2027 ambulance service provider agreement between Portage County and the Amherst Fire District.
This is Resolution 162-2022-2024, submitted by the Public Safety Emergency Management Committee.
Motion by Supervisor Jankowski, seconded by Supervisor Moresi. Discussion. Supervisor Moresi.
Just one question about both of these agreements. Do you usually include the agreement in there so we can review it? Because I see the resolution, but I thought I remember in the past we had
Sheriff?
more meat and potatoes.
Sheriff?
The contract is usually not in there, but the contract summary is, and I don't know why that was not included, to be honest with you. So if you have questions in regards to the contract summary, I can answer those questions for you.
Are you happy with the contract as presented?
Yes, since it's been out of the sheriff's office, we do direct negotiations due to the circumstances involved in regards to the providers. Today you have 2 providers that we negotiated in regards to this. One of the providers was with the expectations to get 2 paramedic system, which we were able to accomplish. The other ones we were able to get the wages up to modern day living for the paramedics out in both of the locations. So feel very confident.
Are the villages satisfied as well? To the best of your knowledge?
Both the village of Plover and also the Amherst have voted on these already, and they are waiting your approval.
Okay.
If there's no other discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, approving and authorizing the 2024-2027 ambulance service provider agreement between Portage County and the Village of Plover. Go ahead.
Resolution number 163-2022-2024, submitted by the Public Safety Emergency Management Committee.
Motion by Supervisor Sislevich, seconded by Supervisor Soik. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 10, adopting and enacting revisions to Portage County Code of Ordinance, Section 3.1.48 by amending county board agenda requirements to provide electronic agendas instead of mailed agendas unless authorized.
This is Resolution 164-2022-2024, submitted by the Executive Operations Committee. I do offer a technical amendment of adding votes in favor of this resolution from the supervisors on October 2nd.
So can you clarify it?
The votes weren't present in that resolution, so I'm just offering that as a technical amendment before the body.
Okay. So again, it doesn't change the intent of it, it's just clerical. So if there is no objections, I'll take a unanimous vote on the amendment to add the supervisors and the vote. All those in favor with aye?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the original motion as amended, the resolution. Questions, comments, concerns?
You didn't take
Oh, I'm sorry. I had Supervisor Laddick and then Supervisor Matt Chakowski. Sorry. Supervisor Matt Chakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer the following amendment. In the big red paragraph section, the largest red paragraph section there, where it says as a general rule, I would like to strike that. And I will justify that later. And then where it says 3 days prior, instead of 3 days prior, I'd like to insert the word business into there. And I guess I will offer that amendment, and I'll wait for a second. And
I'll second that. If I may
So 1 second.
add to it,
Just 1 sec, no. So I can't stack it because so that's the no part. You can come back with something else, but I can't, we've got a motion, an amendment already. I can't change that amendment, so.
Strike agenda. And then 3 business
okay,
days.
yeah, but my amendment will stand how I have it.
Okay.
I'd like to comment as to why I'm doing that, if I could, Mr. Chair.
I just want to make sure she's got it. She's got everything.
We're good.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the reason the strike as a general rule, if we go down later in that same paragraph, it's kind of redundant because it says except when there is good cause for delay, which will be reviewed by the committee, board, commission, council authority, and on. So we don't need that as a general rule because there is a exception if we need an exception. The other thing for 3 business days, personally, I have a career like a lot of the younger members do of this board and some that aren't retired yet. If I get something for a meeting on a Friday that's on Monday, I like to keep my weekends as open as possible. It's kind of hard to review. And I will look at finance, I will look at healthcare center, and I will look at those. If I have to make childcare arrangements so I can make a committee meeting to talk to the committee or tell them how I feel or just to hear the presentation that's going on in that committee, that's kind of tough notice. Over a weekend, my babysitters are out of town. I don't know where they are. It's a hard situation. So I'd like to see that to be 3 business days.
Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts on the amendment? If not, this is the vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Supervisor Moresi, did you have anything to add, or you're good now?
I was just gonna say the darker red, number 1, it says as a general rule. I was just suggesting that we nip that one in the bud as well. So I guess that's not a formal amendment because nipping in the bud isn't in Robert's Rules of Order. My amendment will be to strike as a general rule in the dark red region as well.
I'll second that.
Motion by Supervisor Moresi, seconded by Supervisor Machakowski. Discussion on the amendment. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye on the amendment? Aye. Opposed? Amendment carries.
I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the 3 days, in all of our other ordinances, we have a, reference to days. Is it always assumed that it is business days, or do days include weekends? I apologize for such a weird question.
It depends on the number of days. So statutorily, 14 days, I believe 14 days or 11 days and under, it does not include holidays and weekends. Any amount over that, it includes holidays and weekends.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for having a question for our corp counsel. Anybody else have any questions? We have an amendment from Supervisor Moresi, seconded by Supervisor Machakowski. If there's no other questions on, we voted on the second amendment already? Wow, you guys are going fast tonight. So, back to the original resolution as amended. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, when's our next meeting here? November 1st, everybody. I've been trying to make sure everybody's kept in the loop here, and we've had good attendance so far. So November 1st, put it in your calendars. If there's no other discussions, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Hemrich, seconded by Supervisor Rockman to get him on the board. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.